Welcome to the Self-Reliant Living Show, where we talk all about a self-reliant lifestyle to save money, live greener, eat healthier, and be prepared for anything so you can take care of the ones you love in good times and bad. I'm your host, Jennifer Osich, a homeschooling mom of 3 boys. I'm the author of the Preparedness Planner series, and my husband and I are the lead teachers of Self-Reliant School, a website dedicated to giving you the skills and confidence to take care of yourself and your community. Be sure to stop by and pick up your free videos from inside Self-Reliant School that will get you started growing, cooking, and preserving your own food today. You can pick these up at selfreliantschool.com/free. Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Self-Reliant Living Show. Okay, so as you know, I always like to read the bios of my guests because I don't want to leave anything out. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to check comments really quick. Hello, Skip. Hi, Stuart. How are you? And so when I am looking down, I am looking at your comments on Facebook. And then I have my notes here and I have the camera there. So I'm just giving you kind of a tour of the layout here so you know what I'm doing when I'm looking down and reading some of the comments. Hi, Shelly. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Constance. Lots of people joining us today, and I am so thrilled that you are here. Welcome. Okay, back to our guest. I'm going to read her bio, and she is most interesting. You're going to want to stay for the entire show to listen to our conversation. And our guest is Esther Emery, and she is from Fouch-o-matic Offgrid. That's her and her husband's YouTube channel. She has a little bit more going on as well on the side, but let me read her bio. Esther Emery is an off-grid homestead wife. She lives with her husband and 3 children in a 314 square foot yurt. She's going to explain what that is. On 3 acres in southwest Idaho. The whole family is featured on their popular YouTube channel, Fouch-o-matic Offgrid, as Esther. And Esther has a personal channel on YouTube as well. Esther is also a Christian writer and speaker, and she is the youngest daughter of the well-known homesteader Carla Emery. And Carla Emery wrote the Encyclopedia of Country Living, which you might have heard of. It's a very famous country living sort of prepping guide. Welcome, Esther.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so for those of you, those people who have never heard of you before, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us about Fouch-o-matic Offgrid. How did it get to be called Fouch-o-matic Offgrid? And tell us a little bit about your mission.
Well, that started when my husband made a bike-powered washing machine. To solve our problem of laundry off-grid, he made a washing machine that I could pedal the bike to make it run. And I just thought, this is such a crazy thing, such a goofy, interesting thing that my husband has made. I want to share it with people. So I took his nickname and I put it up on YouTube under his nickname, which is Fouch-o-matic. His last name is Fouch. And because he's kind of a gadget lover, he's been called Fouch-o-matic as a nickname. And I put it up on YouTube, and I had no idea that people would find us and be interested in us, and it would then become a whole relational community thing, which it has become. So we do have kind of a funny name.
Yeah.
But we're an off-grid family sharing our story and our learning experiences with the internet.
I love it, though. I love that name. I mean, that's just, what a great story. Okay, so how did you get to be off-grid? How did that happen? I mean, because it's not like a normal family thing usually. And so, you know, because you're totally off-grid, correct? How did that happen?
I usually say that we've made each decision moment by moment as well as we could. We did not plan to be where we are right now. If you had told me 5 years ago that I was going to live off-grid or that I would have lived this long in a tiny home, I would have told you you were wrong. But we made the decisions a little bit at a time, and we were really in crisis in our urban life. We're both career-oriented people, and we just drove ourselves too hard, trying to juggle family and career and our marriage. We just dropped everything. So we really know what the stakes are in terms of having a healthy life and making choices that allow the family to thrive. So we try to change everything, and building that from the ground up. We've had the opportunity to go back on the grid to reconnect to electricity, and it just isn't the right thing for us right now. So we continue to build our homestead on 3 acres, which we own. So there isn't a debt issue there. And we are, we're trying to build as much as possible a place for our family to thrive.
Yeah, that's great. But you have a little bit more experience than just off-grid, because you did this experiment where you went totally off the internet for a while, and you even gave a TED Talk about this. And can you talk about that a little bit, and a little bit about what you learned from that?
Sure. So my no internet experiment was intended to be an exercise in social commentary. I was ready to be kind of snarky and snide and talk about how addicted we are to our technology. I was not prepared to discover how much I was personally transformed by releasing that dependency. And although my husband was not a part of that necessarily, it's almost like it was contagious, that once I realized how I could be transformed by releasing dependency on a certain technology, he caught that bug as well. And now that's kind of what we do. We try to release dependency on technology. We try to thrive in ways that are not dependent, that are instead, as your show is titled, self-reliant. So I think that the key of my no internet experiment was really a spiritual awakening. I kind of discovered how numb and dead I had been living, allowing myself to be fed entertainment constantly and not really listening to my internal truth as much as I could. And once I discovered how much God wanted to speak to me through the natural world, and just how much I wanted to be in connection with where my food came from and how to keep myself alive and how to keep myself healthy, I got addicted to that. And now that's the path I'm still on.
Wow, that is amazing. Can you talk a little bit about, I don't know, the things that you've learned, about yourself, but also about, how we are so connected with the internet and dependent on it, and how you would advise people maybe to step away from it, and how you would go about doing that?
Well, I think the key is to discover silence and to discover who you are in silence. I'm very connected these days. I mean, you're talking to me right now through the internet. Mm-hmm. For our first 2 years off the grid, we didn't have internet, but now we do. And I feel like it is possible to thrive, to have a good life and be connected. But for me personally, I need to know who I am when it's quiet. So I need to make sure that I can survive those quiet moments. And I think we've all had that feeling that's kind of like boredom, or kind of like you want to just scratch your itch. You need something to entertain you. I feel like our culture and our constant access to internet and entertainment of various forms encourages that and allows us to kind of live revved up and constantly entertained. And it gives us less opportunity to tap into our strength and our capacity for stillness, and especially how the voice of God moves through us when we're silent, when we're quiet, and how we discover our true callings and capacities in the quiet. So I would say for anybody, it's completely possible just to reserve a half an hour of the day to say, I'm just going to shut the things off. I'm going to shut off the things that are clamoring for my attention and allow myself to find out who I am when it's quiet.
Yeah, that great advice. So let me ask you this though, because I know that some people are curious. Like, when exactly did you do this? Like, what year? Because the thing is that, the internet has been at different stages. Of course, we're still in, some of the beginning stages. And so somebody that was born before, I guess, 1980 or so, they remember very well what it was like to be without the internet. And the thing is, though, if somebody wanted to do this, and I'm not saying that everybody should go out and do it, and I don't think you're advocating that either, but I'm just curious how you did it in terms of every other person is connected to, on the internet, and it wasn't that way before the internet came into being. Obviously, we had other ways of doing things, but then everybody else was connected on the internet, and then that sort of left you out, I assume. Can you talk a little bit about how you survived it, really?
Well, there's two questions in there, and I want to make sure to hit the first one, because you brought up something really important, which is that internet technology is changing so rapidly that it's literally dividing us by generations. Our experiences are very different. I was born in 1979, so people call me right on the edge of the generations. People sometimes say the millennial generation starts in 1980 with the birth date of 1980. Mm-hmm. And I found that my birth date really was about the breaking point between two very distinct sets of experiences. There are a lot of people who would hear about my experiment and just say, "Oh, how interesting. That's fascinating. Wow." And there are also people who would hear about my experiment and say, "How did you do that?" Mm-hmm. And generally the people who are asking why are those people who are older than me, who say, "Well, sure, you can live without the internet." We always did. But people who are younger than I am, I have a legit feeling that it's essential for life. Mm-hmm. So the difference between those two experiences was actually one of the major things that was useful for me to understand and discover, and to feel that this rapidly changing technology, it really does divide us by generations in a way that is also not entirely healthy. To make a long story short, I ended up hanging out with old people, and it was the best thing ever. It was the best thing ever.
Because I love that.
I was living in a culture where we're kind of divided. The people who like this kind of entertainment, the people who like this kind of entertainment, we hang out in different places. But I ended up spending a lot of time at church, and I ended up spending a lot of time with people who don't care about the internet, who are comfortable. I started writing letters with my husband's grandmother, and she loved it because for her, writing 3 pages of longhand is normal. Mm-hmm. I tried to get my peers to write to me, and they kind of looked at me like, "What? I'm not going to do that." But it built relationships across that generational divide, which I believe shouldn't really be a divide at all. It was a really healthy thing.
Yeah, that's wow. Yeah. And if you just think about it, I mean, you just kind of articulated, I think, some feelings that are going on in the world today in terms of that generational gap or divide. And yeah, that's wonderful. It's like that would be a great thing if people did set aside time and then to spend it with an older generation, because there's people, they just don't, they're not online at all, and they don't care, older people. And so that is that's just a gem there that that people, I feel like, need to discover. And I love that you discovered it, and I love that you're writing about it. So that's awesome. But let me just, that's not everything about you, right? You have some other avenues that you share your life. Can you tell us a little bit about those different avenues? Because you're an author, obviously you're a vlogger. Can you tell us a little bit about those, and then your favorite one?
Sure. So I used to feel like I had a split personality. I used to feel like I had 2 completely different identities on the internet, because the people who follow our Fouch-o-matic channel are self-reliant folks who are interested in my husband's his finished carpentry skills and gadgetry, and also just our lifestyle, really digging into simple living and family values. And that's one group of people. But I also am a writer, and as a writer, I'm kind of interested in beautiful things and a little bit of poetry, and I'm kind of a lyrical writer and very spiritual. And so I had a kind of different group over there. And I used to feel like I kind of had one life for one set of people and one life for the other set of people. But I'm very grateful that those groups are merging, and I'm feeling like the Fouch-o-matic people are sort of getting used to the idea that I am a writer. And my kind of lyrical poetry loving people are getting used to the idea that I also live off the grid. So things are kind of merging together. My first memoir, my first full book that I've ever written comes out next month, and that's called What Falls from the Sky. I have it right here for you. And that's a spiritual story about my year without the internet.
Do you know what it would take to slow yourself down? Do you know what you might find if you could? I went for a year without the internet, and instead of finding social commentary, I found my soul. This is my testimony that even in this crazy busy world, it is possible to slow yourself down. And in that slow and silent, you just might find your true self begging for you to reconnect in the radical simplicity of looking up.
And I also blog at EstherEmery.com. And then I also have 2 YouTube channels, the Fouch-o-matic channel and then my personal channel, where I talk about some conceptual things that are sometimes spiritual and sometimes just about how to be a healthy, whole person in the world. So those are all the balls I've got in the air. It's kind of a few.
That is great. We have some people commenting. Let's see. Nicole says that that's a great point. The internet does create a huge generational gap. I think it does. And Meredith is saying essential for life. She loves that. She's in her 30s, and her 15-year-old niece cannot believe there was a time when we didn't have computers. Yeah, it is. It's very, the way to recognize it, I guess, is to talk about it a little bit. And then once you recognize it, then you can act on that. So that's this is one of the reasons I wanted to have Esther on. I love the subject, and I think it's really important because I'm just a little bit older than Esther, I think, and I can remember a time without the internet. But I was, my family was an early adopter, and so we've been, on it for a really, really long time. But I can see the gap, and that it's troubling to some people. Okay, so let me talk about this for just another second, and that is that you have the convenience, you have the technology. And once you start down that path, you get addicted to it, whether you can remember a time without it or not. And do you think that you can live with the technology without being addicted to it? I mean, do you think there is a balance that can be achieved? And what does that look like? We touched on that just a minute ago, but can you go into a little bit more detail?
Sure. My family is really testing that right now. It's my feeling that if you can't imagine yourself without a technology, then you need to consider yourself dependent on it. And I feel like you need to kind of re-enter that feeling of being without something on a pretty regular basis, or you're dependent on it. The reason I say that our family is kind of working with that right now is that we've lived quite primitively for a couple of years. And we're making some transitions into a little more comfort. Nobody can blame us, right? But we're working with this question of are we losing the lessons that we've learned from living fairly primitively if we kind of develop these more comfortable structures around ourselves? I think that's a question that you really need to be thoughtful about and continue to revisit. At any point that you're not thinking about it, those are probably the points where you have dependency that you may not be aware of.
Yeah, I agree. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing, because it was not the normal way you think about bringing up kids. Tell us a little bit about your mom, and then are you raising your kids in the same way? And do you think that because you're off-grid, do you think that they will at some point be off-grid?
Well, I was raised by not just a homesteader, but a famous homesteader. So I was raised by someone who literally wrote the book on country living. an 800-page, 5-pound book that a lot of people have heard of. It has a lot of information in it that people find valuable. And as a child, as her child, I found a lot of kind of difficulty between what other people thought about my mom and what I thought about my mom, because she was just my mom and a very imperfect person who struggled. And then here were all these people, and this still happens to me, who say, oh, your mother's so amazing. She changed my life. And as a young person, I had to figure out what was up with that. And my first impulse was to really reject what my mother stood for. You know, she had taken me to the county fair, and I sat there and watched her teach people how to kill chickens. And as a teenager, I thought that was just horrifying, right? Super embarrassing, right? So I went the other way. I chose a career life. I really didn't want to be a country person or a homesteader at all. And then my life came around, 180 degrees. So now not only do I practice most of what my mother preached, if not all of it, I even sound like her. I mean, I'm kind of literally walking in her footsteps. So it gives me a perspective on raising children, I guess, that they may well go their own way. They may go their own way. They may think I'm crazy. They may think that I'm the crazy old bat, who wants to cook things on the wood stove. That may just seem really insane to them. But I'm demonstrating values. And when they are in need, they'll remember. They'll remember how we thrived, because that's the way that I remember my mother. Even though at age 15, I thought this whole off-grid thing, or we didn't actually live off-grid, but she was really into self-sufficiency, of course. This kind of willingness to struggle, this willingness to be in close proximity to animals and butchering and having kind of your hands in the cycle of life. This stuff is not something that I want to have to deal with. But then I reach a certain level of maturity and I say, oh, I don't really have a choice about that. This is life. I need to get into this. And fortunately, my mother gave me a real head start at being able to have those skills.
Yeah. And that's the great hope. You raise them in a certain way, and then you send them off, and they're going to explore and do other things, and you just hope they come back to how they were raised. And so it sounds like that's what happened with you. So that's a success story.
It really is. Yeah.
So tell me about how because you're off-grid and you're trying to make everything or most things yourself. How do you guys make a living?
We're both freelancers. We're in the sweet spot where our cost of living is really low. And that's the only reason that it works for us to live the way we do. I make freelance money as a writer. I write some articles. I've written a book. I have some money coming in from that. And then my husband freelances as a finish carpenter. So he'll do cabinets, or he'll go and work. Sometimes he still works in the entertainment industry, which is what we used to do. So he'll work for a few weeks at a time or a month at a time, especially in the wintertime. And we're just constantly trying to make it all add up. It's not necessarily you can't fall asleep on the job. You've got to pay attention to money all the time, pay attention to what your needs are, but we are finding that it's completely possible.
Carla's saying she hears her mother coming out of her mouth too, so we're not the only ones. Tell us a little bit about your day-to-day life, and you live in a yurt. Can you explain that? And then what about the everyday things that we people that aren't off-grid take advantage of or take for granted, and that is things like, do you have a freezer? What do you do for AC? How do you heat your home? Those kinds of things. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. So I live in a yurt, which is a fancy wall tent. It's got a lattice work structure, but not hard walls, and then several layers of insulation and vinyl canvas vinyl on the outside. Which is also a round space. And we actually love it. We've lived in this yurt for 3.5 years, and there's something about living in a round space that's really it's just special. but it's too small for us. I know there's some tiny house people out there or small space living people out there who know, it's worth it. There are some advantages to living in small spaces, but we've got 5 of us in one room. And so we're really looking forward to moving into a cabin, which my husband has been building. And that's chronicled on our Fouch-o-matic Offgrid YouTube channel. We've been telling about all of that. As far as conveniences or kind of the technology that supports our life, I do not have any kind of refrigeration. And I've become so accustomed to that it doesn't even seem strange to me anymore. But I understand that is a surprise to many people. We can and we ferment. We eat leftovers immediately. In the wintertime, we eat things that can be kept cold. And in the summertime, we eat things right out of the garden. So there's a real difference in our diet from summer to winter, and that has to do with not having refrigeration. I have to be honest that we've talked about getting a propane fridge in the house, and it's kind of expensive, and I'm dragging my feet on it a little bit because I'm not sure I want one. I've come to think that having a large quantity of food kept fresh or kept artificially fresh in that way is actually not the healthiest way to keep it. So that's just my perspective on that. I feel okay with our complete lack of refrigeration as long as I still have my canners.
Yes.
And you also asked about heat and AC.
Yeah.
So we do our best to work with appropriate technology. We have in our home, we have a concrete slab, and we're using a rocket mass heater, which are simple technologies that are designed to really work with the natural environment. So the slab keeps us connected to the earth temperature, so a little bit cooler in the summer and a little bit warmer in the winter, and that's a really great simple thing to do to keep from having to use fuel to cool and heat your home. We also try to have multiple ways of accomplishing things. So we have wood heat, and I have both wood cooking and propane cooking. We try to have a couple of different ways in case one fuel runs short. We have more than one thing to fall back on, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. It makes perfect sense. I find what you're saying about the food storage very interesting and very intriguing in terms of you not feeling it is the healthiest if it's kept in a refrigerator for a long amount of time. That's very interesting. And that you are, totally without a refrigerator, because I know that even a lot of off-gridders, they are, they have some sort of refrigeration if it's like solar powered or propane powered or something like that. But that is a very interesting insight. And that you're dragging your feet on it too. And so, so you may not get one at all.
Well, my husband and I are in different places on that. The thing about not having any refrigeration is that you have to be very aware and kind of constantly on track with what you have to eat and where it is. And I find that to be spiritually a really good way to live. Mm-hmm. I think it's hard to find a right relationship with food. Mm-hmm. But for me, the biggest, most important thing is to be aware of it. So to know what state your yogurt is in, or a couple of days in advance, or what vegetables you have where, and do you need to ferment them? Do you need to put them in a jar? Are they okay where they're sitting? That kind of awareness for me is a healthy way to interact with food. Whereas kind of stuffing it in the fridge, partly it just reminds me of a different time in my life when I wasn't as healthy about food. And so whether it's actually the technology that's the problem, what I've learned without the technology is something I don't want to let go of.
Very interesting. That's a great point that a lot of people are emotional eaters too. And so that this has helped you step back and be aware of all that. That's great. I love that. Can you talk a little bit more about the community that you're building on YouTube? Because I know in your TED Talk you talk about this, that it's sort of a paradox that you were off the internet for so long, but then you're building this community on the internet. So can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. You know, I'm so impressed by the people who comment on our channel. And that's not to say that there aren't occasionally problematic commenters, because I think that's absolutely true, and I have talked about that before. But the people who are just wanting to support, again, that generational thing, we find a lot of people commenting on our YouTube channel who have way more experience than we do. And they just, I'm gonna tear up saying this, they just want to see us make it. And they're willing to give us, encouragement and support and advice. And that's been just an incredibly touching thing for me to realize, that what we stand for in terms of our lifestyle is, it's not just kind of a set of choices. It's a whole identity, a whole lifestyle identity. And we're standing for a simple life, and a kind of valuing of working with our hands, and of just appreciating these household skills and homemaking skills, and people care about that. And just kind of waving their hands at me or at my husband in the comment section and saying, we care about this, we care about you, we want to see you make it. It's incredibly powerful stuff. It can really lift a whole group of people and help us to live the right way.
That's a great motivator. It's amazing how just one comment can make your day and move you on to the next step. I can totally relate to that, and I love that about building a community. And so that is a big thing that I think people don't think about when they are commenting, that the words really matter, and they really they help not only the person that you're making the comment towards, but they help everybody. And so that's a really powerful thing to let people know, I think. Who are your heroes? The people that you look up to, the people that you follow?
Well, I have to keep my mother on that list, because although she isn't with us now, I keep her book and her kind of presence really close to me. So that's my number one homesteading hero, right in the family. But I want to shout out to Starry Hilder here. She's somebody who's also on YouTube and is also off-grid, and she's somebody who has really inspired me. And she actually has sent me some personal messages too, when she realized that I was starting a YouTube channel, and when she realized that I was trying to be vulnerable in my story. She wrote to me and said, it's the right thing to just let people see what you're doing, even if you're not doing it right. Just let people see it. And that was really an inspiring thing to me. And then thirdly, I'll just say again, the people who maybe don't have YouTube channels, but who support us and who give advice in the comments. Those are some really impressive people. When you start to hear what people have experienced in their lives and what they're willing to offer, I really look up to a lot of those people as well.
Yeah. Well, now Skip is saying that the way that Esther's family eats is really the most healthful way to eat. It appears that they eat fresh foods most often and put their own food up free of preservatives. I envy their lifestyle. So yeah, I totally agree. That is a very healthy way to eat. So on your YouTube channel, you do a lot of Q&A, and those are my favorites. And this is on Fouch-o-matic Offgrid. So can you tell us, what's the craziest question that you've ever been asked?
Well, there's so many ways to answer that, but I'll tell you my favorite, which we actually answered on the channel, so some of you may have seen it. My favorite was when someone was expressing concern for us and wanted to know what we do when it's the middle of winter and we have a bear. And that cracked me up, because although we have winter and we have bears, we don't ever have both at the same time because they hibernate, which I think is sort of common knowledge, but as she was asking it, she's kind of forgot. So we made a big joke about it, about the we're going to find bears in the wintertime, when we're going to find bears juggling in the snow and on fire and whatever else, I think that people really want to they want to know about kind of the personal aspects of our lives. They want to know what it's like to be us, So some of the questions can be a little inappropriate or can kind of veer into a little too personal, and we kind of work out work out how to deal with that. But we also love to do the Q&As. It's fun to just be people together, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, that's one of my favorite parts. So if you have not ever visited Esther's YouTube channel, you must go after this show and watch some of the videos because they're great. So, okay, so we talked a little bit about this with the internet, but what advice would you give to somebody who was trying to transition to an off-grid lifestyle?
Right. So first of all, you need to find out what you want or what you're being called to, because there are a lot of different ways to think of off-grid. There are a lot of different reasons to be off-grid. And I think that although many of them are perfectly right and correct, sometimes the way that they intersect can get confusing. So really just to do some internal searching and say, okay, am I looking for a more healthful relationship to food? Am I looking for a sanctuary for my family? Am I looking for greater independence or lack of dependency? Am I looking for preparedness? And all of those things do intersect. But I think that when you feel that kind of urge, it tends to come from a particular thing. And if you can figure out what it is that you're really craving, what you're really wanting, then you can be more specific and more strategic in how you're taking steps. I don't think it's very effective in terms of going off grid to necessarily mimic somebody else. Because the whole point of becoming independent is to use your own skills and your own capacities and your own resources. You have to be really in touch with your reality, both what you want and what you have. So to develop some kind of a process where you can be honest with yourself and really do some internal searching before you take any steps at all, I think is absolutely essential.
And go on your own journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. And having the courage to go on your own journey, to say that even if they're just baby steps, so much of what Nick and I have done, especially the really successful things, we just took one little step at a time. We didn't rush. And then you look back a few years later and say, oh, that's how the puzzle came together. I didn't necessarily know moment by moment, but there was a plan in place here if I just followed all the cues.
Yeah, I love that. That is that's something I would recommend too. It's like you said, kind of take a self inventory and whatever rises to the top, and then be willing to go on your own journey. That's fabulous. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you? Social media, Facebook, obviously YouTube. Where else can we find you?
Well, the hub of all my stuff is my website, which is EstherEmery.com. And then YouTube, and then some on Facebook. Oh, and I'm also on Instagram. You can find me at Esther Emery on Instagram. I just sent out a survey on my newsletter saying, where do people want to see me? Because it is a little confusing figuring out which is the right, which is the most important venue. But I'll continue to do videos because somehow that's working for people and it works for us. So YouTube is really probably the place to look for us, for our whole family, and also for my personal voice in the future.
Wonderful, because that's like one of my favorite YouTube channels, and so I look forward to more episodes on both of your channels, really, because I have seen videos on both and I love them. So thank you so much for coming on, Esther.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun.
Okay, so if you are joining us now or in the middle of the show, I just want to let you know that I have been talking to Esther Emery, and she has a book that is coming out. You can pre-order it now. You can go to selfreliantschool.com/Esther'sBook, and you can pre-order that book. And then I also wanted to mention Esther's mom's book, which is a hugely famous book. If you don't have a copy, you should definitely look into getting one, and you can find more information about her book at selfreliantschool.com/Esther'sMom. And so with that, remember, being self-reliant is not about being selfish. It's not about just yourself. It's about taking care of yourself so that you can take care of the ones that you love. Take care until we talk again. I'm so glad you could join me today. Here's what to do next. head over to selfreliantlife.tv to pick up the show notes for this episode and to watch replays of older episodes. To go directly to the show notes for this episode, go to selfreliantlife.tv and then without a space, type a slash and then the number of today's episode. You can watch this show live every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, live on Facebook or the Periscope app. Don't forget to stop by selfreliantschool.com/free to get your free Self-Reliant School videos that will help you get started living a self-reliant life. Also, if you're listening to this show as a podcast and you've liked what you've heard today, please subscribe through Stitcher, iTunes, or your favorite podcast app. If you're on a mobile device, just search for the Self-Reliant Living Show. If you're on a laptop or desktop, just go to selfreliantlife.tv/iTunes. And while you're there, please leave a review. I love to hear from you. You leaving feedback makes it easier for others that are interested in living a self-reliant life to find my podcast. Take care until we talk again.